what I'd like to do is really just start off the conversation with a simple question. And that question is, what does it mean to be human? And before you answer that question, I ask that you just take a moment and really think about it. What does it mean to be human? Is it the fact that we're made of flesh and blood? We have a body? Well, that's not really that uncommon. We share that in common with many other living things on this planet. So maybe it's because we can think for ourselves, right? Keeping in mind there's some invertebrates that can do that as well. So again, not that uncommon. So maybe it's because we walk on two legs and we're bipedal, and that's what sets us aside from everybody else and everything else. And, then again, that's a trait that we share with a common ostrich. So I don't think that's what makes us human. No, I think being human is perhaps one of the easiest things that we can feel and understand innately, but yet one of the most difficult things to be able to describe. And perhaps that is the one thing, being human, that sets us aside from every other life form on this planet. But what if for a moment mankind wasn't singular? Maybe just for a moment it's mankind's plural. Are we as a society even prepared to have that conversation? What if the things that make us human most, like emotions, love, empathy, are not necessarily unique traits to humans within the universe? Maybe other things can experience that too, and maybe the definition of being human isn't having two arms, two legs, and looking like this, or having a body, or having hair or no hair. Maybe being human is far more profound than that, and maybe those traits aren't unique to us. And so for the past decade, I spent a good portion of my time pondering that very question, along with some very incredibly talented individuals within the U.S. government. And our reason for pondering this very question was due to our knowledge of some very extraordinary observations and data collected on behalf of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or you probably know it as AATIP. And what we learned during this time was nothing less than remarkable, in my opinion, and in the opinion of my colleagues. I'm going to ask you, the audience, to think in your mind what comes to mind when I say the word parachute. Keeping in mind, para, Latin, Greek, usually means beside or above. Most people think of a life-saving device that stops you from hitting the ground, and generally something positive. So let me ask you another word. Paramedic. What does that mean to you? So usually people think probably what you're thinking, a first responder, a lifesaver, generally someone who's going to do good for society, and it's something positive. So I'm going to ask you one more word. What does the word paranormal mean to you? I suspect some of you are having the same reaction that some of us had. And by the way, that's quite normal. It's also quite unnecessary. Paranormal is no different than paramedic or parachute or anything else with a para prefix. The reason why people react the way they do, maybe they have a shy hesitation, maybe they kind of laugh or they raise an eyebrow. The reason why they do that is because of social stigma. Social stigma and social conditioning. And this is something that we've had to fight, because I would submit to you, by definition, everything in this universe is considered paranormal until it becomes normal. Okay? Until we understand how something works, it is always, by definition, beyond normal. So this is some of the mindset that we're challenged in trying to break down these barriers so we can have the conversation. We can have the conversation, the collaboration between our leadership, between our elected officials, between each other, as countries, as societies, as civilizations. So I think these are some of the things that we need to try to combat the best we can, and remove the social stigma from the conversation, so we can really figure out what is it we're dealing with. Should we be scared? Should we be excited? Should we be apprehensive? Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe it's not a good thing. Is it a threat? Is it a blessing? We don't know. And I think we need more data. I think in the end we need more data. Question number 2. Do I believe in extraterrestrial life? Wow. I believe it's certainly possible that life exists beyond our solar system. I've been very careful in the past not to even ask the question when I was in the program. Again, keeping in mind, just as a rehash, we looked at what it was and how did it work, purposely avoiding who was behind the wheel. So for me to tell you it's from the Pleiades or Alpha Proxima, it would be disingenuous. I think we need more data. Could it be from there? Absolutely, sure. Could it also be from something or somewhere else? Yep, absolutely. So I think the bottom line is until we have more data, we just don't know. We can speculate all day long. And the problem here is that in the absence of data, as human beings, we tend to fill in those information gaps with what we know and sometimes even what we don't know. And that can be dangerous. So I don't know. I don't know where they're from. I think it's just about anything's possible. And we shouldn't discount anything. Is it interstellar? Is it interdimensional? Is it, who knows? But we need more data.
Lue Elizondo told the Washington Examiner that the U.S. government has intelligence analysis predicated reason to further investigate whether these UFOs are indeed not of earthly origin. That matters because Elizondo says these UFOs, what the government refers to as unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, are not believed to be of Earth nation origin. Instead, Elizondo says it is a credible line of government inquiry that these UFOs are extraterrestrial, extradimensional, or the creation of an Earth-based intelligence entirely unknown to our human society. Elizondo told the Washington Examiner that the government has evidence to indicate that the most extraordinary UFOs are not human-made machines. I'll say that again. Elizondo told the Washington Examiner that the government has evidence to indicate that the most extraordinary UFOs are not human-made machines.
What that something else is, people want to jump all of a sudden to conclusions that it's aliens or outer space. There's a whole range of possibility. Once you understand the world of quantum physics, you realize, the universe in which we live in right now, we live in a three-dimensional world of space and time being a function of the fourth dimension. But quantum physics isn't necessarily relegated to those same parameters. And once you realize that that is a reality, there's 3 fundamental physics models we use. There's classic Newtonian physics, of course, and then there's Einstein's theory of relativity. And now we have quantum physics. And somehow all 3 of those that seem to be completely opposite in terms of understanding how nature works actually are all correct. And so we have to reconcile that. So what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with something that's from outer space or inner space? Frankly, the space in between, which we've never been able to explore. There's a whole bunch of possibilities. And so I'm very careful because we just don't have enough facts yet.
There's also some very interesting, I think, congruencies, some interesting relationships that are just now really coming into light for the very first time. New information that I think if people found out would be very, very surprised. I think some people might be a little bit apprehensive and scratch their head and say, wow, what does that mean for the rest of us? Other people might say, aha, I told you so, right? So it depends on who in the audience will be listening, but I think there's something for everybody. I think at the end of the day, information is information, and you're going to do with that information whatever it is you want to do with it. That's not up for me to decide. That's up for you to decide. That's up for the audience to decide. ultimately, I think it's about informing the people, informing individuals about what we have discovered.
This is, some of this stuff is really hard to comprehend, because when you really take more than 1 minute to sit back and think about it, the existence of UFOs, not a balloon, not a drone, but something else, a phenomena, it's a mixture of emotions.
So that's actually I think that's an interesting perspective, because this is important. And I've mentioned this before, but I'm not sure it's resonated yet. We are our species, and some scientists have attributed this to what they call the cardiosocial phenomenon, meaning the first 9 months of our entire life is spent in our mother's womb for the most part, and we hear our mother's heartbeat. And that is a binary on-off rhythm. And because of that, it affects the way we view the world, the way we view nature, the way we interact with each other, to the point where we look at everything in terms of extremes. So it's an either or solution. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you ever talk to anybody on the street, they'll tell you in terms of it's either up or down, left or right, hot or cold, black or white, good or bad. We always look in terms of either or scenarios. And so when you talk about this topic, the phenomenon, people say, well, it's either from Earth or it's from outer space. It's extraterrestrial. But in reality, that's not necessarily so. There's a whole bunch of other potentials and options that this could be. And we're just used to thinking that way. But nature,
like what?
Nature usually, well, let's look at physics, for example. Let's look at the reality. Right now, I'm having a conversation with you, and I perceive my entire universe based upon the 5 fundamentals, if you will, senses that I have: touch, taste, hearing, smelling, right, whatnot. And that's it. That's how I judge the entire universe. And yet there's this entire reality around me that I can't perceive. I have Wi-Fi signals coursing through my body. I have cosmic radiation coming in from outer space. I have cellular signals bombarding my body in GPS, and all these realities going around me. Even in the visible light spectrum, okay, I can only see within a narrow band. Anything in the infrared or ultraviolet or beyond that, I can't perceive. I need technology to interface with that. So by definition, most of the universe I can't even perceive. And then when you look at the human being in the context of scale, if you look at the very, very small to the very, very large of our universe, right, the human being sits right roughly in the very middle. So the universe is about 27 billion light years from side to side that we can see in the visible universe. And to scale as big as that is, when you look at the subatomic particles in the atoms that make up our body, they're roughly the same scale, meaning they're at 1 × 10⁻26 in size. So you have this equally large universe inside every human being. And so my point being is that the majority of the universe that we interact with, we will never be able to see. Look at the night sky and look at the pretty stars, and now look through it through a radio telescope. You're going to see nebula. You're going to see things that are right in front of your eyes, but you can't see them. So is it possible that there is more to reality and to life than just the very narrow band in which we perceive it and in which we live and scale? Is it possible? Well, I would submit to you that most of Mother Nature, every time we try to define who she is, she defies our explanation. She doesn't fit in a neat little box.
So there are things, you've established that in broad terms, there are things in front of our eyes we can't see. On a more micro scale, would that also apply to UAP?
Sure. Why not? I guess my point is that we have to keep all options on the table until they're not. This is something we have been dealing with for a long time. And like a lot of things, imagine the first person who decided to get on a boat and sail over the horizon, right? And there's discussion of sea monsters and krakens that will devour you and destroy your boat. And yet we did it anyways. We did sail and we explored the world. And it turns out, 500 years later, yeah, there really are sea monsters, except for we call them the great squid of the Pacific, and we call them great white sharks and whales. Now they're just part of nature. They have a scientific name, but those sea monsters still exist. They're there. We just learned to understand them. And maybe this is the same thing. Maybe this is just yet another expedition over the horizon in which we're going to realize what we thought were monsters are really just neighbors.
What? Lou! Oh, man, that's a perfect analogy. So you're saying, just at the point that humanity thought they had discovered everything on planet Earth, UFOs have represented not so fast. There's more to discover.
That's possible. And that's why I say we really need to do ourselves a favor and leave all options on the table until we have more data.
Okay. Sea monsters. Wow.
So the report all but says what is obvious to anyone who thinks about this, which is these are not from a foreign military. And maybe the lackadaisical approach or the disorganized approach on the part of the military to looking into this suggests that too. If we thought these were Chinese, we'd be on it. And so we don't think they're Chinese. They're not Chinese and they're not Russian. So they're extraterrestrial. I mean, what's the other? I mean, let's just say it. I mean, what's the other explanation? Potentially.
Well, Tucker, that's a fantastic question because, as we've said before, when I was in AATIP, this is something that could involve outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. And that's why we've always said, let's keep all options on the table. The more we learn about quantum physics and this remarkable universe we live in, the more we realize that our current understanding of the construct of the cosmos is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving with new information, new knowledge that we get.
Do you believe these are crafts being controlled from some entity beyond Earth?
So, Megan, that is an absolute great question as well. And if I may, just for a moment, because I want to be comprehensive with this answer, and I don't want to simply say yes or no. As human beings, we are what scientists often call cardiosocial animals, and what that means is for the first 9 months of our existence or whatnot, we're spent in our mother's womb and we hear our mother's heartbeat. And as a result of that, we tend to look at things in extremes. And if somebody were to ask you, are you hot or are you cold, up or down, left or right, good or bad, black or white, we tend to look at things like that in a very binary sense because we're human beings. But in reality, Mother Nature in the universe doesn't work off binary. It's far more complex. And so I've often told people this could be from outer space, it could be inner space, or the space in between. And what do I mean by that? Well, we now know through quantum physics that the universe is far more complex than we ever thought. And the bottom line is that we are now recognizing there are realities all around us that we don't, as a human being, we can't interface with. For example, if you were to go out on a starry night and look at the beautiful sky, you'd see a lot of pretty stars. But if you take a radio telescope and look at that same sky, all of a sudden everything looks different. You're now seeing an infrared and ultraviolet. Now you're seeing nebulas. So there are realities all around us. You and I having this very conversation. There are Wi-Fi signals coursing through your body. There's AM/FM signals. There's radar signals coming in from the airport. There's cosmic radiation coming in from the cosmos, and there's neutrinos coming in from the sun, just completely bathing us. And yet we can't interact with it. And the reason is because we have only 5 fundamental senses, if you will, to judge our reality in our universe. And so it's not, in essence, to make this short, 99% of the universe we can't even see or interact with, and yet it's real. So is it possible that these things are from outer space? Sure. But it's just as possible that these things could be just as natural to Earth as we are. And we're just not at a point now technologically where we can interact. Maybe these things are from under the ocean. And this is why I think we need to approach this topic with all options on the table until they're no longer on the table. We have to be careful to go down that rabbit hole prematurely that these are from outer space, because it could be, but it could also be something very different. One of my colleagues said something that I think is very interesting. We spend millions of dollars each year trying to find microbial life on Mars. A lot of money is spent through the SETI program to search for technosignatures, radio technosignatures, by the way, in our own Milky Way. But this Earth has been here for a really long time. Is it possible that some sort of intelligent life found us first? And I think these are all possibilities. We have to, and at the end of the day, it could be foreign and adversarial too. So, to come back to, if you will, Earth, so to speak, forgive the pun here, it could very well be a terrestrial explanation. And this is why it's so important we have a conversation about this. It has to include not only our national security apparatus and our intelligence community, but I think it needs to include FAA and NOAA. I think we need to bring in NASA. They've stepped up to the plate, thank goodness. I think
Yeah,
we need
they're
to
doing
bring in,
that.
I think academics and scientists. We all need to have part of this conversation because it may be a much bigger, much more profound question. Just simply, it's either from Earth or not.
That was a fascinating answer, first of all. But second of all, your notion that maybe they found us first. We're off trying to explore Mars. Maybe they've already found us, and maybe they've been here for a long, long time. Reminds me of all the guff I give my husband Doug for watching all these shows on ancient aliens. Because if it involves World War II and aliens, he will watch it. If I come out of the bathroom after washing my face at night and he's just surfing, guaranteed that's where he's going to land. And it's fun to mock, but he's like, now you take me seriously when he saw me doing all my research for this. Because who the hell knows? But I love the notion that, look, yes, could be from another planet, some sort of controlled force from another planet, but it could be some sort of force from our own planet, which we purport to understand, but do not.
Megan, the universe is wondrous and complex. There were many times this is maybe a paradigm moment for us now. And I'll just say this. This is not new to human beings. We have faced these pivotal moments as a species, whether it was first crawling out of the cave and looking at the sun, or standing on a sandy beach and looking at the horizon. And it took one person to say, you know what, I'm going to sail over the horizon. And everybody, of course, said, well, there's sea monsters out there. The world is flat. You're going to fall off. And it turns out, that we are here because someone took that chance. And it turns out that there are sea monsters. There are great white sharks, and there's blue whales, and there's a giant squid of the Pacific. But we now realize they're not really monsters. They're just part of our world, part of our environment, part of nature, part of our reality. And maybe it turns out this is very much the same thing. Maybe we're standing on a sandy beach yet again, looking to the horizon, and this is simply just another horizon for our species.
Also, the fact that you asked me, is it possible there's life in the universe? And my response is, just look around you. Life is everywhere. On this one little rock we call Earth, life is in the deepest part of the Antarctic ice. It's in the darkest and deepest places of the ocean. It's on the tallest mountains. It's everywhere. So I think maybe what we need to do is kind of sit back for a little bit and maybe reevaluate of what we consider life is and what it means to be a living thing, perhaps.
You mentioned something very interesting that a lot of people want to talk about and say, is this extraterrestrial? And I want to just, if I can, for just briefly delve into where we are with modern day science. We are human beings that a lot of now people in psychology refer to as cardiosocial animals. Means we look at things in extremes because for the first 9 months of our existence, we were in our mother's womb and we heard that binary heartbeat of our mother. And so we tend to look at the life, if you will, in our universe in that binary way. It's either good or it's bad, it's hot or cold, black or white, up and down. And that's how we tend to judge things. But in reality, the universe and physics isn't binary. It's not binary at all. In fact, there's all sorts of options and opportunities of what this could be. So again, back to your question, is it from here or is it from out there? We don't really know. In fact, there's lots of other options on the table. It could be from, as I've said before, it can be from outer space, inner space, or the space in between. As we begin to learn what quantum physics is, and we begin to understand our place here on this little planet, we begin to realize that there's a lot of other options. We judge the universe in 5 fundamental senses, the ways that we perceive the universe, and that's touch, taste, hear, smell, etc. And if you can't use those senses to look at something or measure it, then we really can't interact with it. And yet we know the majority of the universe around us, 99% of it, in fact, is not perceivable.
There are right now Wi-Fi signals coursing through your body. There's cosmic radiation coming in from the cosmos. There's neutrinos coming in from the sun. There's radar hitting you from the local airport. And yet these are all realities, and you can't interact with it because we just don't have the tools to do so. Take a beautiful night sky, look at the stars, and you might say, wow, that's really a pretty sky. But if you now take a radio telescope and look at that same spot in the sky, all of a sudden you begin to see things that you couldn't see before. You see in the ultraviolet, you see in the infrared spectrum, you see nebula. So I guess my long-winded point to all this is that we must keep all options open. If we already know that 99% of the universe we cannot perceive or interact with, then there may be other options here. This may not necessarily be something from outer space. In fact, this could be something as natural to our very own planet as us. We're just now at a point where we're beginning to technologically be able to interact and collect data. This could be something from under the oceans. This could be something from outer space. We really don't know. And this is why I think we really need to take a whole of government approach and look at this, because it is day by day, it's seeming like more and more this conversation is shifting from a human technology, quite possibly, we don't know for sure yet, but to something far more profound.